we're getting a picture on the TV. Yeah, I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, giant leap for mankind.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me? Welcome to our final installment of JadaTalks for Paris Art Week for today. Today I am joined with Cheselyn Amato, who is an interdisciplinary artist, visual artist, poet, and transformative experience instigator for sublimity, awe, and delight. She is a current member of the Jewish Art Salon. She previously taught at the Art Institute of Chicago for 20 years, and currently she resides in Northern California. And at this point, you are all familiar with Susie and Jonatas and Jada, the Jada team. So without any further ado, let's get into it. We are here today to talk about a new sincerity, the rise of a new sincerity and the end of irony, and what that means for metamodernism and what that means for Jada, right? And I would like to hand this off to Jonatas and Susie so you could talk a little bit about what that means.
Well, Sam, this can be taken to so many different directions. What I will say is this. Right now, in the world in which we live, we have so many walls, literal and symbolic, built around us, that we simply understand that it's no longer a matter of choice that we start building bridges.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because we cannot afford to continue having this disconnect that we've been having. And in the year of the great pandemic of the past 100 years, we have also seen a certain rise in lack of tolerance, in the polarization of simple aspects of life, such as wearing a mask. And we see this as a complete and direct consequence of doubting narratives, doubting previous knowledge, doubting guidance, and that is simply because of this rupture with structure that we see. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it got a little fun for a second, but you're back.
Okay. Simply said, irony has divided us quite a lot, and it was very much necessary at one point in the past 2 decades. But for today, we simply cannot afford to rely on irony and skepticism any longer. It is time that we look eye to eye for the sake of the future, for the sake of this generation and our near future. It is important that we see and recognize the humanity in the other, especially the suffering other, the capital O. So that is why Jada invests itself in creating a platform in which we engage in the birth of a new kind of sincerity, one of vulnerability, one of asking questions without really knowing if we will ever reach the answers, but at least of being open to seek them.
Yeah. As humans, we have this tendency to put ourselves into these boxes that we call our identities. So one part of your identity might be you're a Christian or you're Jewish. One part of your identity might be, what you believe your race is, or your ethnicity, or your nationality. And my favorite thing about Jada is we have been working consistently to build these bridges across these different groups that might not, otherwise cross-pollinate.
That is right.
So, Jonatas, I love how you introduced the necessity to leave a sphere of irony. But I guess what's being posited by this talk is on the other side of the bridge is a new sincerity, a fresh sincerity. And when I think of metamodernism, my mind goes to authenticity. And I think authenticity has become a buzzword. And if it becomes a buzzword, it seems to lack authenticity. But that we may be in an age of surrender, that it's time to be raw, genuine, exposed, and to connect with others on that plane of humanity, of what unites us. And often what unites us are our fears. It's also what divides us often, right? Cheselyn, you're new to the conversation, at least to me. I'm curious to know where you are in this sphere of thinking about the end of irony, which in some ways is talking about the end of postmodernism, and ushering in embracing, working from a different disposition, a disposition that is maybe not so heady, maybe more in the heart.
Well, and that is so much, I think, of what this time is about, is that we kind of reached the apotheosis of the mind, and now it is a rediscovery really of heart and actually the gut too. For me, it is so delighting, this speaking to sincerity, because, for me, sincerity has been, absolutely is what I am, but has been, in a sense, such a source of suffering to be sincere, and there are dangers in the intensity of any kind of thing, any way of being. So, but I really want to celebrate the sincerity of Jada's commitment and effort to this. And I'm delighting in the desire and passion that I've experienced in the whole event for, and I say of, human being, the desire to not miss one drop of the human experience, and examining what and where we are, where we have been, where we're going. So I have, sort of saying, like, the simpatico for me is almost overwhelming. And that is in itself the definition of sincerity. And so, I think that accessing our human being is possible in a deep and full way. And I'm going to say through any medium, because intentionality is what it's about. It's creating what I call metaxou space. I mean, it's a Greek word meaning the resonant space, between, and it can be created in any medium. It's the choice. It's what we desire. It's what we determine. So, care and the desire to experience, to know, to be a human entity, can always be recovered, I feel, and so. That's why, this is my romanticism and my sincerity, that expression of, and I say also, so I'm prepared to, but I want to say, I'm actually prepared to let go of humanity, because I see us as an entity amongst entities in this grand, incredible mystery. Mm-hmm. And so that thing, so I'm going to speak to what that is, because I think it's the fear of letting go of us as we have been, that the defense mechanism is irony to some extent. So to say that irony might be an expression of exhaustion sometimes, of a distrust of sincerity that might arise of disappointment, of the ravaging and devastating experience in general, which of course, the 20th century.
Sure.
As a whole.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that anything can become, like passion can be overbearing, irony can be overbearing, anything can become overbearing. So I say, and so too can ironical orientation become overbearing. Okay, and are irony and sincerity revealed as aspects of one another? Irony as grief and sincerity as enchantment. So there's something.
Very good question. So, Cheselyn, what you just mentioned there, the idea of irony having been born out of fear and exhaustion, I really love. I don't know if you actually used the word exhaustion. Did you? Yes.
Yeah.
This is profound because the way I place this, and of course, whenever we talk about movements, eras, we don't really have a date from the time when one started, the other began, right? It's always a little fuzzy, right in that edge.
Mm-hmm.
But I do place postmodernism, which is a movement, an understanding of a worldview, perhaps, marked by irony and skepticism. I see it very much as a result of the fear of the destruction that occurred by scholars, by technology and human advancement in the 19th and in the 20th century, the first half. And I just feel that that's a natural response. It's one that you should have expected, and that's why, on one hand, I can't criticize this irony that surfaced in the world with all the destruction, all the wars, right?
Absolutely. It's about numbness. It's, that after heartbreak, after the total, in a sense, deconstruction of human being as we imagine it, of the capacities, for love or for, in a sense, human perpetrated evil, I mean, it's like a great fall that took place. It's about any kind of death. When there's a death, that there's a period, right, and people have different responses. The body does different things to protect us at first, like the numbness when you've been in an accident, because it's actually a protective mechanism so that the being can have enough strength to then actually endure the thing that they're going to have to endure.
So I would add that if we have the fall, and the irony is encumbered in that the picking oneself back up is where we enter the age of new sincerity.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
100%.
Because I think what happens is there's a repression, suppression, oppression process that, that's always they're sort of saying that when they're internalized prejudice. But when something bad happens, when there's trauma, one of the problematics of that is it gets internalized by the one who's been hurt. And then there's a eclipse of the light, in a sense, an eclipse of fullness, because that's the nature of damage and wounding, I think. So new sincerity is an indication that there's been enough repair to be able to risk, a certain aspect of the fullness of human being. How I see it.
I think relevant to today in the social climate and the social unjust that we are acknowledging as a culture, particularly in America, new sincerity, I think also has to be coupled with humility. And when we talk about allyhood, new sincerity among those who wish to be allies to harmed population demands of us that we be witness and listeners in an active way, and that we don't in this new sincerity that we don't attempt to know so much. Part of postmodernism, I think, was a pretense that everything was so figured out. And I don't know. You may want to comment on that, since I create a paradigm that's a dialectic, right, between the two. I think there are some elements that may not have been present in postmodernism and in the age of irony that we're discovering now. That let's calm the chatter. Let's be better listeners. Let's create platform and not try to occupy it.
Yes, it's so critical. I think, that maybe, again, to say that postmodernism, I mean, especially we're talking within the domain of art, but it's it was a whole Weltanschauung. But, you know, as kind of this apotheosis of the commitment to certainty, which then, you know, is about a kind, that is what is about the fascisms and the total, you know, that type of thing ultimately. So, but it was the apotheosis, but it sort of was this, but there was a little awareness. So it's sort of saying, well, no one, you know, we don't, if you don't understand, we don't explain, because there was a fear on one level of being the sage on the stage, but on the other hand, not knowing how not to be it. So sort of stepping back in a certain sort of way. So, you know, I think where we are now, in the sense of the new sincerity or a rebirth of the risk to be fully human, I think that that is why we are able to engage again in the profundity of social unrest. You know, that we reached a crisis point with the global condition of ecological imbalance. The fact that an opening has been made for COVID, because I sort of say, what is it that has made it such that COVID is stepping out of its place and looking for its partner out there somewhere, because something has reached a penultimate level of imbalance. It's like, you know, and so, you know, this is this intensely ripe moment to say is, does humanity want to choose itself? Self-selection of humanity now, because the Earth's going to go on without us. I mean, that's, I mean, one of the things is it was for a while they're saying, oh, the Earth's going to end with us. But I think we're starting to see, oh, no, the Earth is not going to end with, you know, with us. We're going to end before the Earth does. To me, actually, that's a little bit of some sort of a consolation and something in all of this, because it's humbling, like you said, Susie. It's, we are, you know, mandatorily being humbled at the moment.
One thing you might want to respond to, or is well, before we all started conversing, just you shared with us that you spent many years teaching at Art Institute of Chicago. Is that right? Is that where your tenure was?
School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Gotcha. Excuse me.
That's the art school. There's
all right, that's right. Our keynote talk was given by Karen Leder, who's at FAU, Florida Atlantic University. And one thing Karen was talking about was the need to reposition art history in order now to create a platform that is much more sincere and embracing of the makers of the world. That we have had a level of hegemony in our presentation of the history of art, and it has been a very patriarchal and very whitewashed presentation of makers. And she quite honestly, metaphorically, but also in some sense literally, ripped up the history books and is now platforming a much more deliberate practice of inclusion in retelling the history of the arts. And so I wonder where you are in thinking about all of this and how this plays into the new sincerity, the humbling of the artist and of the educator.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's where I guess, you know, even I am very cautious about isms and ologies all around. So even meta modernism or the new sincerity, beware, because this is the convention of art history. This is the convention of history writing.
This is the establishment.
Yes, that, you know, a vision rises to the top, whether it rises to the top because of you know, a despotic insertion, or it can also result as a result of the persuasion of sincerity. So the question is how do we empower each other equally, always, and always beware of the problematic of becoming, you know, the new hegemony, even in one's greatest intention to not become so. So it's so risky. And so that I'm going to just read to you the first line. So this is from 2005. So I do spoken text within these very large scale installations that I make, 2D, 3D, 4D, whatever medium it is, to create an occasion or a circumstance for becoming ultra aware of this mystery being. But so this line of it says, hey, I do not wish to be, nor can I anyway be tamed, for I am wild as they come, don't you know it, eh? 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144. This is a sequence of numbers to be loved. And there are other patterns, swirls and spirals, twists, billows, clouds, swags, swoons. It goes on. Hey, Mommy, did you know, and my son said this, and did you know that a tree is a tree, a house is a house, a fence is a fence, a gate is a gate, a person is a person? Did you know everything has a name? Isn't that something? I said to him. Can you think of anything that doesn't have a name? Can you think of anything that doesn't have a name? Now we shall enter the no names land, the land of no names, the Holy of Holies, inner sanctum where the acts of unnaming begin. And I said, this goes on, but so let me say at the outset right now that I will continue this pursuit even if it violates your civil expectations. But even a line like that, right? It's always about like, what is power? But, so we say if there's anarchy or that people will not help each other survive if it tips one way. And then there's that other way of basically usurping freedom that we're always doing. And people are always taking over other people's freedom. So I don't know whether I answered your question there.
No, just a dialogue. No, this was, I enjoyed your reading.
Yeah. I'd love to see what you have to share with us. Do you have it queued up?
Well, I did put so okay, let me I mean there's too much, for the time that we have. Let me see here.
This is awesome. I mean, like, what other speaker have we had that has like come this prepared? You guys, right?
Well, this is where I'm saying though, I see my slideshow filling up the screen, and I guess that's okay.
Go for it.
All right. Well, so actually, Sam, this is kind of for you because you said something about a mark of courage. You said a mark. You talked about that in one of your introductions. Something about the mark. And so this is a mark of courage. It was part of an installation that I made. Literally that in a certain way, what I do periodically, because I am at a point where I am working so cross dimensionality wise. I mean, I make collages that are physical, but in the sense of the Cubists, right? Photos of texture and real stuff, and then I ran the stuff through, and made the collages directly on a photocopy bed, and then then there was the digital photography, and then just all these levels of reproduction, right? And sort of in a sense distancing or not, but via passion, imbuing them all. Now, what I do periodically, because I started as a drawer, drawing, it's simply the act of being in the body, being present, the absolute, joyous, phenomenal thing of it. So, but for me, in the whole sense of sincerity, yes, maybe in up against irony, and irony to me as representing melancholy, my own inability to stay believing in and loving being human, and succumbing, then this act of making a mark and that improvisationalness. So I love that thing that it never existed before, something from nothing, but the beauty of the dynamic between confidence and humility, always. Mm-hmm. That act, can we find the balance? Making the mark. So this is a mark for courage, resilience, hope, humility, you name it. So then, this, somebody who, Simone Weil, just this most amazing, complex individual, she is just somebody whose writings in 1947 and, in around that time, about her. She actually experienced in its heartbreaking reality the distance between knowing and knowing with all one's soul. And the one object of her life was to abolish that distance. That is very much a description of the life.
Interestingly, Karen Leader brought up Simone, so
yes,
this is right in line.
Yes, I know. I really enjoyed what she had to say there. And so here, you see, so this piece is probably, I realize I don't know exactly, maybe the late 80s for me. And you see Metaxu there, Ofan Men, these are words I love. And then that's the quote this is another quote actually, that is similar to what I just read. And then, so this is called A Temple in Honor of Life Lived Every Day, an Unfinished Song of Love. I made this in 1996 in Chicago. And the fundamental thing that I want to share about this is that I did not know that I named this piece after myself. So it's sort of this crazy way of sort of the age of narcissism, trying to emerge out of and to escape and to become a different kind of being. So A Temple in Honor of Life Lived Every Day. My name is in Hebrew, Chaya. It means life. But my name, Cheselyn, which my parents don't know they gave me, is Chesed, which means unconditional loving kindness. But they didn't know Cheselyn and Chesed, right? So that's love. And then Amato means love. So unfinished song of love, I came up with this title, it had nothing to do with my name. And then afterwards I realized, that is Cheselyn Amato. And to me, what kind of gift is that? So those are a lot of the synchronicities that have happened to me in my life. But I want to place it I was in New York in 1980-81. I started, after I graduated from college, I got a job in a gallery on 57th Street in Manhattan, And that was the time when Soho was burgeoning. Actually, HIV and AIDS was happening. That wasn't even named at that time. So it's kind of like COVID of today. Yeah. And the thing is that in Soho, what was happening at that time was that this person named Renee was kind of Soho was coming up, but it was still very art world. It was that was in a sense the defining factor of a sensibility of postmodernism in the gallery world. It was a very cool, cold, period. And so Renee made these paintings on the walls of walls in Soho, and it wasn't about the taste of the time. And she signed Renee, her name was more important than the work. And the thing with that is that, that was this touchy-feely reassertion. It was countering the sort of concept of what is great art, which was still so, even though there was the idea that it was being questioned, there was still, a set of aesthetics that you had to meet in that time. There was no freedom, really. I'm not saying this is getting a little complicated, but but I don't know, something reflexive, I'm trying to talk about that reflexivity. I named this piece and it was after myself. And then the piece that you see behind me, so this was at the Contemporary Jewish Museum in 2008 in a show called The New Authentics, Artists of the Post-Jewish Generation.
Wow.
Okay, this was the inaugural exhibition for a new building of of the Spertus Museum in Chicago. I don't know what I just said earlier, but this is where it was. So what this is, and so this is a highly reverent work on my part, because honestly, my work is very, it generally is very reverent. But this is as edgy as it gets between irony and sincerity. So what this was a physical, this is 10 feet by 16 feet. It's a self-adhesive vinyl digital print. And it is a collage that was made on a photoscan bed of physical placemats, napkins, and an image of Auschwitz from above, which is over here on the far right. Mm-hmm. And So in talking about the issue of irony and just saying in the story, in the Jewish experience of saying that, well, there was the Holocaust and then there was the post-Holocaust, maybe say that was the period of numbness, of internalizing fear of being whole because of the wounding. And then I have for myself called it post-Holocaust. I'm a post-Holocaust person because, and what this show is about, which actually caused an incredible crisis at the museum because there were donors and members and staff even who were very upset by the exhibition because the exhibition was maybe failed and had, the title was a problem to say post-Jewish because people I think thought it meant not being Jewish anymore. That's not what it meant. It was a reference to postmodernism. That was a problem too, I think, but people didn't even get that. But the thing is that some of the shows in the contemporary Jewish museums, in the beginning of the 2000s, there was an effort to try to, it's like growing pains to heal. How do we heal? How do we remember and be able to recall and reclaim sincerity as swooning for being, swooning for the desire and the robustness of life. Right? But how do you do that? How do you honor history? And so all I'm going to say is that there was nothing about this piece that in any way was equating Auschwitz to, but here's the thing, the textiles that I got on Canal Street in New York City, which is my root city, that is all about the absolute cherishing that I have for my roots, my parents, in the tenements, grew up in the poorest of poor Jews in New York City, And so this is a love letter. This is a love story that I made. And I, to this day, but I was aware, and this is the last thing I'll say, I knew this was as far out as I had gone, where there was the potentiality that there would be someone who would not understand it from within, who would recognize that's Auschwitz. But there were also, I knew, a lot of people who wouldn't know that was a photograph of anything because it looks just like a pattern of anything else.
Yeah.
It's like a design element, right? Mm-hmm. So the question is how do we, preserve and this issue of sanctity and sacred and the profane, both in a heightened sense. Okay, yeah.
So it is, by the way, I just find it such a striking contrast that looking at that image and then considering one of the first image you showed us of the mark, the simplicity of the mark and almost a visceral quality of the mark.
Absolutely.
That you engage with material and mark making in such a basic way. This piece in front of us, there's so much context that's needed to be appreciated. Everything from your procurement of materials to the layering of materials in the context of this being a final application, which makes it completely dependent on the surroundings for its existence. We know that final, as you remove it, is going to destroy the moment we're appreciating right now, looking at it. Which is ironic in and of itself because we're looking at a digital representation and it may not even be there right now.
But one thing they say about the fact that it didn't exist after that, that is kind of like looking at the Tibetan sand paintings.
Yes, right, absolutely. Anyhow, so I just wonder in terms of fulfillment and satisfaction, the difference in creation for you between making this piece, which the creative process was procuring the materials, laying it on the scanner, all the pieces to the installation, versus the experiential quality of making mark in such a basically profound way. Right now, in the age of new sincerity, do you find you're drawn more towards, for lack of a better word, basic raw materials, or are you still just as comfortable working digitally and working in a very calculated and methodical way where most of the production is in anticipation of it?
Well, for me, it's just totally fluid.
Okay, because I'm asking because in this time of crisis, one thing that seems to be prescriptive is getting people to back to working basically to working with their hands and working with immediacy.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, go ahead.
I mean, I do think because, you know, I mean, so many people are so deeply removed from the tactile, you know, that and also that, you know, this cultivation of being observers anyway, whether you know, a viewer is observing at the tactility that someone else has produced, like actually looking at the mark that another person made, or the mark that, you know, you make. I mean, so my own, let's say activism in the world is that I'm continuing to do what I can always to facilitate other people's opportunity to have primary experience. But I think it can be limiting in some ways. In other words, if we get caught in looking backward in a reactive sense, to overly emphasize the physicality of the mark. I mean, as givers in the society, we can facilitate and create ways to reconnect people to the desire for primary experience. So that's the point of the mark, is that. And so I'm not that worried about medium. There's the same issue that there always has been, maybe, for any of us, to say if becoming disconnected with the awareness of something so primary, like the amazement or the wonder, always a little bit there with us. You look in the mirror and say, what is it? You know, what is it? So that's all my goal is just to keep myself on my toes, to say, what is that before me?
I had this one. Sorry, Sam. Would you like? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, on that note, you know, thank you so much for this enriching conversation, Cheselyn. We're getting close to the end of our time. I just wanted to, you know, wave the signal for any final remarks before we end the stream.
One thing I would like to add, or it's a little bit of a question, if you don't mind. We have much going on when we say it's a bold claim, right? To end irony and to add energy to the birth of new sincerity. It's kind of a very daring thing to say. But one thing that I will say is, what is our intention in this? And Cheselyn, please add to this. It's very, very important. You're the new voice in this conversation for us. In this
I'm just kind of clicking here in order to. So this was called Uncontrollable Beauty, an Odyssey. Everything we need is always with us. Over there, that fluorescent pink thing is stretched on a trampoline frame. It's called the pink membrane of knowing and unknowing, and the dark ship of passion.
Ooh.
And so, but there's the mirror, which one could say is irony or sincerity, but irony, because we're seeing it in the mirror. Now, I have a whole other aspect of the work, but these are two herons. One is flying in the draft of the other. So the point of this is to say how we work together. So I made that in July, you know, that's already after COVID, but then this one is very recent.
Oh, wow.
So this one is saying, based on that idea of saying, how can COVID self-serve, you know, in other words, like, so sort of making some kind of a sense of the possibility of healing. To say, because we're saying, how can we dismantle those crowns? Because right now those crowns are searching to attach, and that's why there's so much ravage. So, and then this is the very most current thing so I have, and I think I'm just going to put this one on as a final answer to you. And this one is a kiss upon my forehead. And I say, I am so weary, oh beloved. Thank you for your kiss upon my forehead that comforts me so.
That is new sincerity. It's definitely new sincerity.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this conversation. It was great having you, Cheselyn.
Oh, thank you so much.
Everyone, this is our last talk for the day. We'll have some additional programming tomorrow, so feel free, be sure to tune in. Take care, everyone. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.